Daryl Recommends Podcast is a podcast recommending series and shouldn't be mistaken as a reviewing one. Opinions about each show are my own and should not reflect what each podcast has to offer. Content warnings aside, I believe if any recommendation in my series interests you, you should give it a chance, regardless of how I personally feel about the show.
In a world where solid-state electronics and vacuum tubes are still meta, people never stop loving atomic-powered everything. A chosen 500 stepped inside a subterranean vault to be spared the nuclear horror of the inevitable Great War. 25 years later, they emerge after the fallout settles to retake Appalachia. Among them, two former rivals whose blood feud will tear West Virginia apart in their epic struggle for survival. Chad, a vault bro who has a strength of 15, an intelligence of 2, and is a complete wasteland dickhead. Simon, a complicated anti-hero who chooses light and hope, but accidentally...
Set in the Fallout universe, we follow two residents of Vault 76, let loose in the post-apocalyptic Appalachia. The two of them become at odds with each other, and their choices may change the future of the Appalachian wasteland forever. You thought the experiments only happened in the vaults. Out here, they had only just begun. Chad, a Fallout 76 story, and for brevity's sake, I'm just going to be calling the podcast Chad for short, is a Fallout 76 fan podcast following the story of two vault dwellers, Simon Rex and Chad Johnson. Chad is a dark comedy podcast that takes inspiration from old radio plays, all the way to the Fallout universe it is set in. Chad is currently near the end of its second season, and it has 2 more seasons planned after the second season's finished. So, this show, one of the things I do want to get off the bat is that this is probably going to be the most critical of a podcast I have gotten yet. And it was very interesting while listening to it, thinking about, like, why am I so hypercritical of every little aspect about this show? Because I have never gotten like that with a podcast. I think the closest I have ever gotten was with Woebegone, because I said in my Woebegone video I wasn't impressed with the beginning of the show, but I was more impressed with the later aspects of it. And right off the bat with this show, at least like after the first couple episodes, I started getting like really like into just like analyzing the show and how they did certain stuff. And thinking about it, the more I listened to it, I think it was more so because of the media it's based off of. I, unfortunately, as somebody who got into Fallout around the time that Fallout 4 came out, I did not have the greatest experience with the Fallout fandom near the end of, like, me being super into Fallout. And I think part of my thoughts with this show carries on from my feelings to how I felt about the Fallout fandom to the end of me, like, transitioning from drawing a crap ton of Fallout 76 fan art to drawing Far Cry 5 fan art. And, like, not to say that my thoughts about the show are mainly negative. I actually, like, I have some criticism about the show that I'll get into, but nothing that's, like, overly negative. A lot of it has to do with my own thoughts about the Fallout story and the Fallout universe in general, and also just personal taste, which isn't much of a critique, as I've said in previous videos. I don't think, personally not finding something funny or not being into something makes something bad. I just want to put that out there. I just want to put that ahead because I found myself being super hypercritical about the show, and after, like, sitting with that feeling and thinking like, I am enjoying listening to this show, but why am I so critical about what the show does? And I think it's specifically just because of just how I feel about Fallout, the story in general, and how I'm so used to how people online are, if people who were into Fallout or are still into Fallout, like, get what I'm meaning. So that is kind of, like, the reason I think I was like that, because I never get this way with podcasts. Like, I'll try everything at least once, and even if I don't tend to enjoy it as much as some other people tend to enjoy it, I'll still listen to it just to see if I like it or not, and to give it a recommendation, because I'll like I said, I'll listen to everything at least once. Or most things. Don't try to get me to listen to Joe Rogan. Though there's one thing about the show that I did not like, and that is most of the humor. And that, like I said, this is something for personal taste. It's more of a me issue than the humor in the show. There is some fat jokes, which I don't like fat jokes. I don't like making fun of fat people. It's gross. But luckily, it's like the number of times they do it is less than the number of fingers I have on my hand. So it's not the worst, but if you don't like fat jokes, unfortunately, that is in this show. But most of the humor is like raunchy, suggestive stuff. I've been calling it in my head like Rick and Morty humor. And there's some of the raunchy humor has gotten like laughs out of me, and the show has gotten some good laughs out of me. Like, there was like one in an early episode about like, it was like a 1950s-esque commercial about pie, perfectly preserved pie. And the like characters in it are talking about the husband going to the neighbors to get pie from her instead of eating his wife's pie, but it was like all set up like an innuendo for the husband going and sleeping with the next door neighbor. So that was a funny bit. And there's like one bit where the overseer, the Vault 76 overseer, she was like on trial and they're trying to get her name from her, and so they're like, "What's your name?" And she's like, "The overseer." And like at one point he's like, "Tell us your first name," and she just goes, "The." And like it's gotten laughs out of me for that. Sometimes the humor can pull you away from the story, which it's also kind of one of the reasons why I don't like the humor as much as other people probably do. I'm so sorry, I find Ella the most annoying fucking character in this show. I do not like her at all. But like other than that though, the one thing that this show does so good is its story. It has probably one of my favorite storylines in a fan-made Fallout franchise like story, whether it's like comics I've read or like things people have written. One of my favorite storylines for a Fallout like fan story ever, and it's so well done. It is so well done. The show is focused around Simon, Rex, and Chad. And Simon's like your typical kind of pathetic protagonist. He's got these big dreams about like finding his two friends, Amada and Jake, and starting like a little trading community and like having people who are like traveling come over and trade supplies with them. And, you know, generally, like, rebuilding Appalachia and the way that, like, the people in the vault believe that's how they were going to rebuild Appalachia before it turns into the gigantic PvP mess zone that it becomes. And then you got Chad, who is basically, like, the very beginning of the show describes him as, like, that one asshole jock from, like, high school who, like, you would assume he peaks in high school, he's a jerk, but, like, he's also, like, the big, like, everybody knows this guy, but also everybody fucking hates this guy, and he doesn't give a shit, and he's an asshole. And so that's, like, Chad and Simon at the beginning of the show. And, like, the way that it develops them, they're not, like, two-dimensional. I was very surprised with the direction that the show went with both of their character arcs, but it also is, like, one of those things where it's, like, this is how you do, like, a good plot twist, where you take you have a false protagonist and then you switch it around with your like false antagonist, and it's like holy shit. And it makes so good with like the writing of it general, and just like the main storyline itself of taking the video game mechanics of Fallout 76 and sometimes just Fallout in general and putting it in the story in a way that not only can be funny, but also, like, could make sense in the terms of, like, something Vault-Tec at least would do. Like, for example, like, one of the big things about the show that they find out early on is that nobody from Vault 76 can die, and they also can't leave Appalachia, and they'll make jokes of, like, you know, finding random weird objects and enemies that shouldn't be carrying these things. But yeah, no, it'll make like jokes like, for example, like, you know, finding a mole rat and it being like, oh yeah, this mole rat has mole rat chunks on it, and then oh, this mole rat also has a desk fan on it. That's really weird. And so yeah, it's just very interesting with how it like decides to put that in. And it's just a very like fun way of them doing that, and being it less so of just like, well, this is how the Fallout universe works, and more so of just like, hey, the residents of Vault 76 are in an experiment, and part of that is getting out of the vault, and also like turning the atomic shop into purgatory post-death is really fucking funny. That was a bit that I really enjoyed a lot. just like I go on about like the development with the main characters, like Chad having a more positive development without turning him into this like goody two shoes, like kind of like how Simon wanted to originally be, him and his friends, of just being like, we're gonna go do and rebuild and be like a bunch of, you know, good Samaritans or whatever. And then Simon having his like own fall from grace, and the two of them using their own traumatic backstories. Like Chad had like an abusive father, and Simon's parents both died when he was a really young age. And having both of their flaws, whereas Chad decides to like be better with the flaws that he has gotten from his own traumas and from just like being the kind of person he is, being like, I don't want to do the like stuff that doesn't make me happy anymore. What makes me happy is being a parent to this like little girl I adopted, because he gets himself a adopted daughter who's a ghoul, versus Simon being like, I have abandonment issues and I am making it everybody's problem. It's just very well done, especially since like the bits of it were put there since like season 1, and so when it develops into that like switch, it makes sense. It's not done where it's like, really bad plot twists. I have so much to say about really bad plot twists, and I think this is one of the ones that is done really, really good. They are just such good foils for each other, for characters who also just hate each other. Having your two main protagonists, like, abruptly just hate each other and despise each other, and then just, like, have them constantly having to go at it, whether it's like they have to work together, or if it's because they're forced to work together, or they're at odds with each other. It's just very interesting to see that. I kind of wish that they were going more into the side characters development, because there are a bunch of side characters, but the like more recent episodes start doing that. So I have like hope that we'll get like a lot more with that into end of season 2 into season 3. Like, she's not my favorite character. My favorite characters are Susie and Simon, but give Patsy more development. I want to see Patsy go absolutely feral. She should be the raider queen that she is always meant to be. Give that girl more character. I adore her and her fucked up ways. And one of the things I just also enjoy with the show is just like, you could tell what it was inspired by listening to it. It feels very Fallout without feeling like a very bland, boring, repetitive Fallout story. But it also feels like one of the things that Kenneth Vigil, the creator of the show, mentions is like his inspiration for old radio dramas. And it feels very much like that. It's got that old, not like super, super old, but it's got like that feel of like listening to a radio drama that you would like, at least for somebody who's like as young as me, like would hear use as like the style for like listening to a radio drama. And also just like as somebody who is currently studying for animation, I have had to take a bunch of animation history classes, and listening to them, well, I would put it up in the corner, I would like listen and watch them as I'm doing other work, but having to watch a bunch of old animated shows, it also has like the vibe of that. For some reason, my mind is going to like the very, very old Superman cartoon. That's where my brain's going. It's just like despite my own critiques with the humor of the show, which is I think is like the only thing about the show I don't like. That and just Ella in general, but I adore the story that they've like put into this universe. It's just such a very well thought out story and very fascinating. And I love that they go silly and stupid with it, which I think is just like one of the things with Fallout is very critical about like the modern structure of like imperialism, you know, American exceptionalism, about capitalism and overconsumption. And the series very much critiques that, and I feel like this show is one of the ones that like gets that about Fallout. And it's just like, and it's like one of the things with it is Fallout does it through satire, and that's like one of the things that this show does it through. And just also the jokes that this show makes about like, oh yeah, Fallout is a video game. And it puts it in like genuine funny moments, rather than being like, ooh, see? This is a video game! So it's just fun how it does that. So I will say, for content warnings, if you play the Fallout games, expect like any kind of mature stuff in the Fallout games is going to be in this show in general. So If you find the Fallout games are a bit too violent or a bit too sexual for you, then that's that. There is an emphasis on child endangerment because one of the main characters is a child, but she's also a very violent child. There is like one scene where one character just straight up threatens to fucking murder her. So, yeah, if that's something that makes you uncomfortable, this is probably not a show for you. And a lot of suggestive jokes and suggestive content in the show. It does tone it down into season 2, but there is still a lot of it. That's just kind of, it's mostly indie humor, and it's kind of not the humor that I enjoy, like I said, but just putting it out there. But overall, I think the show is a great piece of Fallout fan media. One of the things that actually drew me into listening to it in the first place was Kenneth Vigou's interview with Appalachia, which is how I first heard about this show. I've been listening to Appalachia for the last couple of years, which originally started off because I was doing my own research into Appalachia and the culture and politics and everything about there for my own webcomic in Harmony, which you can read in the link down below. And so I enjoy Appalachia, so I've been listening to them for a couple years, and they did an interview with Kenneth. And as someone who was a Fallout 76 isn't as bad as everybody says it is, since the very first day of launch, mind you, it was very refreshing to hear somebody talk about the game and understood exactly what I thought made Fallout 76 a good game despite its rocky start. Kenneth Vigou, I shake your hand right now. I'm shaking it right now. You may not see it, but I am shaking your hand. And it's just very refreshing for somebody to actually have like rather than being like, well, this online game is so glitchy on day one, it should be running perfectly. And it's like, as somebody who has like a game design degree, I'm like sitting here and I'm like, please, it's an online game. It's not going to run smoothly. This isn't like putting out like fucking Starfield on day one. Like, if your game is gonna be entirely online, naturally, it's not gonna fucking be perfect or stable. Whatever, it's fine. And it's just very good. It's just very good. And it's just like one of the things that the show does, and like, yeah, it's Fallout 76, but it gets the vibe of like how I got with playing Fallout 76, which has been making me miss playing Fallout. And it was also, I was listening to the show when I started streaming Fallout 1, which, by the way, we will be getting back to that. Only reason I haven't is because of Art Fight, but we will be getting to that probably after Art Fight and after I get back from Canada, because I'm going to Canada in the beginning of August. And yeah, and it's just like the original stuff they put in the show, like with Mr. Dark, which so much fun. I had so much fun with the horror aspects of the story with him and all the stuff they put in it. And one of the things that's like nice about what Kenneth Vigou does with the show, one thing is that they have a lot of people from Bethesda who, like, whether they voice on it for charity stuff or if they're like regular characters. I'm sorry, but making Pete Hines one of the villains in the show was like the funniest choice you could have possibly made. But like, also they do charity. They have a Fallout for Hope charity, that's the name of it, and they raise money for Alzheimer's as well as just like John Hopkins, and it's really cool. It has a huge community with over 700 gamers for charity, and the current date for their next stream is November 14th. So if you guys want to watch a bunch of gamers stream for charity, then you should go on over to Fallout for Hope's Twitter account, their Twitch account, give them a follow, get the notifications for that, and just check out all the other work that they've had. I will be linking that down below, as well as the Fallout, Chad's Twitter account. And anything relevant. I always put relevant links into this. I don't need to go over that with you every single time. But it's just like, overall, this was a very fun Fallout show, and it was very good despite my once again own opinions about the humor. But I think you should give it a chance if you're somebody who's into Fallout and like it. And also, if you're not into Fallout, you can still listen to it, because although the podcast does go into this, like, people should already know about at least like the very, very basic stuff about the Fallout franchise. it does not like go into it in a way where you should already you should have already played all the games. At the minimum, at least be familiar with what Fallout is about. But the podcast still goes about it. Like, you know, like some of the characters are still learning stuff. They won't sit by and like, you know, like, this is what a stim pack is. This is what a mentat is. This is what a buff tat is. This is what buff out is. It's not gonna do that. But honestly, stuff like that isn't super, super important to the overall story, because the stuff that is important, like, they put more context into it, and they also go about it like, you know, like, hey, we were born in this vault and we've learned a history, so let me tell you about what we learned about the history of the world before the war ended. And I think that's just about it for this video. This is probably going to be one of my longer episodes because I've just had so much to say about the show. I've been like thinking like, oh my god, I can't wait to do the video for this show. When I first finished listening to it, I have a list, so naturally it wasn't going to be the very next thing I made a video about. And I'm finally really glad to go around to doing it. So if you like Chad and it sounds good, you should go check out Chad, a Fallout 76 story on any of your podcast listening places. I listen to it on Spotify, and check it out. And you should also check them out on their other websites. I will link those below, as well as their charity, Fallout for Hope. And I think you guys will enjoy it if you enjoyed Fallout. So yeah, anyway, that's the end of it. Goodbye, and I will talk to you all later.